Hello, my name is John Reynolds. Welcome to Extraordinary Life Stories. On this episode, I'm talking with Maximillion Cooper. Maximilian is the founder and innovative mastermind behind the global brand Gumball 3000. In true entrepreneurial spirit, he's blended his passion for traveling, racing driving, fashion and fast cars into the Gumball 3000. Gumball 3000 isn't just a high-octane road trip. It's a unique fusion of adventure and entertainment with a philanthropic edge supporting youth and environmental causes through the Gumball 3000 Foundation. I've been looking forward to this conversation, so let's get into it. Maximilian, thank you for joining me.
Pleasure.
Tell me, who's Maximilian Cooper?
Who am I? It's a good question. I am born in the UK, Middle England, Worcestershire, from the Malvern Hills. And 25 years ago, I started a brand called Gumball 3000.
A huge brand. Take me back to a young Maximilian and the early kind of influences, who and the kind of what that led to this.
Yeah, I think growing up, I was always passionate and obsessed with sport, all sport, football, Formula One being the two main ones, I think. But and equally had a passion for music. And my dad's an abstract painter, so I've kind of grown up with the art world as well. So I think that kind of, the creative worlds is something that was just sort of, I was born into. And yeah, that young me was sort of an aspiring sort of, wannabe footballer maybe, or bigger kind of poster boy would be sort of James Hunt, wanted to be a Formula One driver.
Very cool. And he was an icon of the sport, right?
Yeah.
So were you actually playing football? Because you can't go racing as a young Maximilian. You can in latter years, but were you in go-karts? Were you pursuing the sport, or were you looking at that as a...
No, I wasn't. So as a, that young me, teenage me sort of thing, I juggled every sport that, I would do at school sort of thing to as high a level as possible. I managed to do, have trials for different football teams, that kind of thing. In football, I played table tennis for England. I did other sports at sort of national level, or county and national level. I'd never got a chance to do anything with cars, and my dad doesn't even drive a car. So for no reason other than when I was a kid, he had a motorbike the whole time. So I kind of sat on the back of a motorbike, got picked up on the back of school. But picked up on the back of a bike from school and had those sort of experiences. But I think my grandfather was super into cars and had a beautiful collection of Italian sports cars, mostly Alfa Romeos from the early 70s. And I think he was the kind of the influence on me, sort of, watching F1 every other Sunday or whatever. So
and Alfa Romeo, that's a passionate brand. So there's an interesting cars that can be engineering and mechanical. Yeah. And then there's an interesting cars that can be emotional.
Well, I think he would have grown up in an era where Alfa Romeo were Formula One or Grand Prix cars and have a whole different kind of relationship with motorsport than what people know today.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
So the interest was there. You're now sort of fast forwarding to choosing a career and kind of what ultimately becomes the brand that's Gumball. Tell me about the journey that led to that and what you pursued and how that kind of fused and organically came together.
So, I always had big dreams, and growing up in Worcestershire was sort of, had a desire to kind of, as beautiful as it is, I wanted to kind of get away and sort of, explore the world and create something. And I moved to London when I was 18. I went to a college called St. Martin's to do fashion design, which was, at the time it was quite a big deal to get into St. Martin's. It was quite a prestigious place to go to. It was very sort of inspiring, a lot of inspiring people there, tutors and it got a great kind of history of sort of alumni going on to be head of different fashion houses. And even when I was there, one of my tutors there was John Galliano, who was head of Christian Dior at the time, or a little bit later. So I went there, and that was early 1990s, and I was thrown into that kind of London party scene a little bit. And also being St. Martin's, a lot of fashion brands used to come and sort of, not only sort of try and headhunt, I guess, some future designers, but they also chose a bunch of us to kind of be as models in adverts or fashion shows and whatever. And I, within weeks of being in London, I got asked to be in different fashion shows as a model. And within, the following, let's say 6 months, it went from being in a show in London to me doing the rounds of London, Paris, Milan, New York as a runway model, being in adverts for Giorgio Armani and Ralph Lauren. And that gave me some money. And I used that money wisely to learn to race cars. So I literally...
Good investment.
It was my, it was the one thing at that sort of, at that point in my life, circa sort of 18, 19, I'd never had that chance to race cars. I was passionate about cars and Formula One, and I just never had that opportunity. So, I got some nice checks coming in, quite fortunately through modeling, and I used it to have a go. And at that point, I didn't think it was too late for me. At that point, I wanted to be Formula One world champion. It was, that was what I wanted to be. So I went and did the, Donington Racing Drivers School, got my racing driver's license, and over the next 6 years, I raced in different championships, kind of, trying to weave my way up the ladder of being in a good team. And I was okay. I wasn't as naturally gifted as I was at other sports, and I think, sometimes you see drivers sort of overtaking you thinking, how are they going that fast, and I'm like, I've got my foot to the floor, but I'm not as quick as them, for whatever reason. So, but I pursued it, and it was an incredible kind of decade for me, because I sort of juggled racing cars and modeling for that sort of 6 years, of 3 years whilst I was at St. Martin's doing that. And when I say racing and modeling, you're only doing that kind of, a handful of days every month. It's not every day. So, I might be on a racetrack every other weekend kind of thing. So I did that. And then instead of sort of leaving St. Martin's and thinking about, what do I do next? I was still racing and modeling and enjoying that at that time. It was taking me all around the world. I was meeting some great people, becoming friends with very successful people in their fields, whether they were, in the fashion world, they might be, key people in that industry, or if they were the people I was meeting through racing cars, maybe team owners or sponsors or just part of that sort of scene. So I sort of stayed with that really, and did another 3 years of racing, and I did a law degree at the same time, which was my kind of, that was my rebellion. Doing a law degree was literally, I'd grown up, with parents that are sort of artists, and dad being a real abstract sort of painter and sculptor, and
so the creative side,
and I sort of got that creative world. I felt like I knew that world really well, and I wanted to kind of give myself a challenge really, and I also, having had 3 years of sort of London and fashion, I actually missed a bit of normal, what I would say would be normal university life that other friends of mine were having at sort of, still playing football and rugby and other things like that London didn't give me that chance to do. So I went to Sussex Uni and did a law degree there. And then when I finished that, that was the time for me where I had to make some sort of decisions, because, by that point I knew I was not going to be the next world champion F1 driver.
Fair play for realising that though.
Yeah. And obviously modeling was something I never wanted to, intended to do. It just sort of happened, and it was a great experience, and it obviously paid very well at the time. And it had allowed me, both of those pursuits allowed me to sort of travel the world, a huge amount. I was on a plane sort of every week almost, it felt like. And so I sort of found by the end of that decade, or at least that sort of six years of that sort of academic journey, I got this incredible network of friends that were sort of, not only friends from pre-London, because the one thing that I sort of skipped out in telling you about sports-wise, I was also into skateboarding, which was quite unique in the sense that not many friends of mine that were into football also like kind of action sports, but I kind of really enjoyed that sort of world, and the creativity of that world too. I guess almost the early days of what I would say now has become sort of that street culture, sneaker culture kind of world is kind of what I saw. And even me going to St. Martin's to do fashion, it was about that kind of, I was influenced already at that point by sort of American street culture. So, going back to sort of now coming up to sort of late 90s, I was like, what do I do with all of this in a way? Am I going to focus on just one of these? Well, long story short, I tried to buy a Formula One team. And this is how Gumball sort of came about, basically. So I tried to buy a team which existed called Tyrrell.
Of course.
And I didn't have that kind of money at that point anywhere near. I had pennies, in comparison to what was needed. But I'd met some really wealthy people over that, the prior sort of, several years. And I kind of pitched them my dream vision to kind of create, the most sort of rock and roll racing team. And I think I mentioned before, but I'd grown up in that sort of era of, let's call it the Hesketh James Hunt and McLaren James Hunt era, right up to sort of the Senna kind of era of motorsport. And I felt like it was an era that had gone. Motorsport was becoming, as all sports have increasingly done so over the last few decades, more and more professional, more and more corporate, and lost a bit of the edge that I think had it, gave it some of its appeal. And some of the personalities of the sport were sort of lacking in it as well. And so I was juggling, for that sort of period of me racing in the fashion world, I was sort of going to events that were hosted by car manufacturers that were spending an enormous amount of money on an event, a party or something. And it was as dull as can be. And at the same week, I might be going to a fashion party that had no money, had spent nothing on it, and it was just the coolest party I'd been to, kind of thing. So I just sort of saw that opportunity in that sense that I could kind of bring those worlds together.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I tried to buy Tyrrell, raised money from a very wealthy guy that I got to know that owned a team that I drove for, and found myself in the room sort of negotiating to buy it with Ken Tyrrell and his sort of second in charge, Harvey Postlethwaite. And we agreed a deal. And it was like, I'd got all these amazing plans. I was bringing fashion designer friends to kind of do the liveries or the artwork or the race suits and everything, and just giving us a cooler edge a little bit. And friends that I'd met through fashion and the sort of the party scene, I'd become friends at this point with lots of sort of, lots of the London musician world, the party crowd that were out and about. And so I had all these great plans to just kind of like make us that kind of the cool team that in a way would attract sponsorship. And knowing that sponsorship gives you the money to kind of race faster a little bit was the kind of the plan. And make us the kind of the team that the public would like to support. I sort of felt at that point that Ferrari is different. Ferrari's always got its fans for, the last, since Ferrari became a team, they've kind of captured the attention of the public and they have the passion and everything, and they've always been read so. But I felt like there was not really post the kind of JPS Lotus kind of era, much of team support. And in this period that I'm talking about, late 90s, that, fans would go to races to support a driver, but not a team. And I sort of felt like teams should be brands, and they weren't. They were just racing teams at that time. Now they're all trying to be brands and do everything, because they realize, such a lot of money involved in it and everything. But back then it wasn't like that. So anyway, long story short, we agreed a deal, and it was sort of going to contract and everything. And then it was announced that cigarette advertising was going to be banned in the sport in sort of 3 or 4 years' time. So all of a sudden, British American Tobacco piped up and offered Ken Tyrrell pretty much twice the amount of money that we'd offered. And he said yes to it, and it became the BAR Honda Formula One team. And that sort of put an end to that dream at that point of having this racing team. But what it did was, by that point, I'd got all these conversations going with all the people I knew about getting them involved. And I didn't want that to stop. So I kind of thought, what do I do with it all? I'll invite them all on a road trip around Europe. And that was the first Gumball. And that was my way of just keeping essentially the relationships of the people that I've been talking to about, launching an F1 team. It was just about like showing them I could do something and getting them all in the same room together, and more than just in the room for a meeting or one night or whatever. This was like a six-day road trip with parties every night, and it just worked. That was the kind of the catalyst for what has taken shape over the following 2.5 decades.
I love the fact you took the time to explain, because I've always loved the brand, and I've never known about the Tyrrell scenario, and the fact that as entrepreneurs, as a serial entrepreneur from your point of view, that could have stopped you dead. All that effort, all that work, but you pivoted. You actually thought, oh no, what do I do now? And you saw the opportunity around you. Yeah. And you didn't take clearly too long to think about it. And then you created something that not only was it probably a whole lot of fun, and everyone that went on that sort of car rally will remember it and fondly, but it's 25 years now. And it's a super brand.
Yeah,
did you get a feeling on that first one that you were onto something? So did you get that feeling there and then? We're like, oh, this is working, because ultimately it wasn't your original plan.
Yeah,
you've probably done that
absolutely.
to consolidate, but then did you have that moment where like, this works?
I did just probably a little while after it. Yeah, after I'd put it on. So basically this road trip that I put on, that first one, it was sort of circa 50 odd cars, 120 people. It was still a kind of a who's who of people on it, and the most eclectic mix of cars that you could put together. So in a way, if anyone has heard of the Wacky Races cartoons, Penelope Pitstop and all of that lot, we kind of emulated that in a way. More emulated that than probably Cannibal Run films. But actually, in saying that, Cannibal Run films had the cast of characters too. So we have kind of similarities to it. But I think I didn't want to be a car rally organizer. So that putting that on was literally to get those people in the same room together. But what it did was, it was a kind of a shambles of a week, that it was very disorganized, and I hadn't budgeted properly, and just, I was sort of almost a one-man band at the time with a couple of assistants helping me that did an incredible job. And we put on this sort of, parties and hotels and adventure across Europe with really kind of nothing, and I also made it a real challenge that by putting this on, I kind of didn't want it to be again, I didn't want it to be like anything else that existed out there. And there weren't many car rallies at the time, but there were sort of car owners club trips and vintage car rallies. But what I was trying to do was more this sort of a unique sort of journey, if you like. And so I made it quite difficult, quite an endurance. I also kind of, the name Gumball 3000, I started it in 99 when everyone's talking about year 2000. So I wanted to be this brand of the future. So that's where the 3000 came from. But also it had this secondary sort of connotation that the Le Mans 24-hour race, people race 3,000 miles to the nearest mile almost after 24 hours. It's kind of, so that 3,000 was a bit of a magical number for me. So I planned this 3,000-mile route around Europe, thinking, if you can do 3,000 miles in 24 hours at Le Mans, then planning over 6 days, it's going to be easy, right? So it was like, on the second day, first day was like London to Paris sort of thing. And then second day was actually, if you can geographically visualize this, from Paris to Le Mans, actually, we incorporated Le Mans, and it was like qualifying week for Le Mans. So we actually got to parade and do all that. Then we drove to Monaco. And when people got to Monaco, it was like, 9 to sort of midnight in the evening, first to last car arriving. And they all thought they were staying there, and they weren't. They had dinner there. And then they got another sort of route card information to say breakfast in Rimini. And so they had to carry on driving through the night across Italy and got to Rimini for sort of breakfast. And I found that by the time people got to Rimini, they were broken. They were crying, they hated it, they wanted to go home, they didn't like me, they were shouting at me. By the end of it, when they crossed the finish line back in London, sort of 3 days later, everyone bonded. And I felt like anybody that did that rally, they've bonded for life. They know each other for life, they're part of it. And it had that bit of magic that I realized that if you, get a bunch of strangers together, if you climb Mount Everest together, you'll know those people forever. You'll share that journey with them. You've shared that journey. You've shared an experience that sort of is memorable. And I really liked that. So realized at the end of doing that first rally that, by doing this rally, I can bring together an incredibly interesting collective of people every year. By having celebrities on it, they were sort of building my brand for me. So 3-4 months after that first rally, we got covers of Esquire, GQ, and FHM magazines, which were really important in PR terms back then.
Because you were ahead of your time, ultimately. That's like influencer marketing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this is a decade before any
Yeah.
social media came about. But that all happened sort of organically. But actually it happened because the event was interesting and the celebrities on it loved it and wanted to share it and talk about it. And then obviously I'd got the sort of fashion background, so I knew a lot of the fashion mags anyway that were interested to just sort of come on it and see it and shoot the parties and whatever and stuff. So it just sort of took a shape of its own, really.
Yeah. But how have you kept it so current and relevant? Because just listening to you there, I understand the power of a network. So that bonding, those people that came on at that, they'll talk about it now somewhere
Yeah.
over dinner tonight. You know,
Yeah.
when I went on the Gumball
Yeah.
in 2002.
Yeah.
But what you've done is you've deliberately kind of brought new people in, and you've gone to new places, which means you're constantly networking to bring those people in, and you're constantly researching, which must be a lot of fun, by the way, new places to drive.
Yeah.
But how have you sort of evolved it where nothing's been the same and it stays current?
So I think once I realised that I was going to do this again, the second year, which I was sort of thrown into partly because people really loved the first one and there was an appetite for it, and partly because I owed so much money after the first one that I had to pay for that one. So I was thrown into the second one to kind of, raise more money and keep things rolling sort of thing. But once I realized that, this rally could become the backbone for everything that I love, and the opportunity for me to make clothing, to make films, to have, product deals, to bring sponsors in, to kind of, travel the world, create a kind of a lifestyle brand, the rally became my sort of catwalk, my runway each year. And like a fashion brand does, you've got to reinvent yourself each year sort of thing. So that's why we never, created never done the same route twice. And that second year, I decided to fly all the cars mid-rally, all 120 cars and 3 Antonov cargo planes and a passenger plane. And people didn't know that was going to happen. That was just like mid-rally, that their route card says, head to this airport, and there are these planes there. And I flew everyone, across the continent. And it meant that once I'd achieved that, the world became small. So it meant the rally could start and finish anywhere in the world. And that made it sort of expand as an adventure that people wanted to be part of, in that sense of the people that would be attracted to driving it. But as a brand, it was growing it globally as well. And then a few things happened in that early stages of Gumball. By the third year, we got a TV deal with MTV. That was it was a 10-year deal we signed with MTV for it to be televised, and that was a great backbone to have as well. The first of those MTV years, those shows, was the Jackass special. That was the highest watched show on MTV in the US of that year. So it sort of catapulted the brand into that kind of consumer youth culture kind of market. That was that sort of skate audience as well, and music audience. So it kind of evolved the brand being beyond just a car event.
I remember Tony Hawk was huge at one point in the context of the association with the rally. And so did you influence, because you've just mentioned you love skateboarding, so I imagine you were at the heart of pulling all the strings to bring the people that you wanted.
So the likes of Jackass guys, Knox from those guys, Tony Hawk, Travis Pastrana, anyone that was sort of significant in that sort of action sports world, I knew socially already. So again, it was really kind of me inviting this network of people that I just got to know over the prior decade, really.
And actually bring it back to Formula One, Lewis Hamilton's been part of it before. Tell me how that came to be.
I met Lewis sort of, I think, around sort of 2008 to 13. We had, our main sponsor was Puma. And every year we got, multiple sponsors, different categories, and Puma was that sort of sportswear sort of sponsor, and Lewis was also sponsored by them at the same time. So we ended up getting invited to events and stuff, and just got to know each other. And that one year he sort of said to me, when he's already world champion, he was like, "I want to do Gumball. Can I do Gumball next year?" And I'm like, "Well, it's probably it might clash with the F1 season." He's like, "I'll figure it out," and it just worked out that
so he wanted to do it.
Yeah, so we just, he raced in Monaco one weekend and went straight from there to Gumball and did Gumball, and then following weekend another F1 race. So, yeah.
I love that. And organising this and all that goes with it, and people going out having plenty to drink in an evening in terms of entertainment, people that are driving over speed limits around the world. There's so much, it's like herding cats, right?
Yeah,
and I remember, forgive me, I don't remember the details, you will, there was an accident somewhere, and I remember people around me, because I've got people we both know that have done the Gumball, and I've always shown an interest. I remember people saying that could be the end. What have been the biggest challenges and things to
that was by far the biggest challenge in the 2.5 decades of this, and it came at a point where, sadly a genuine accident sort of happened that I think, there's obviously accidents happen sadly every day all around the world, and sometimes it's beyond your control, or you can sort of try and do what you can to sort of eliminate any risks. But this accident happened driving through a part of Southeast Europe where drivers weren't going that fast. It was behind, we had UN Land Rovers that day following convoys, as part of area that had, Kosovo and around there that had UN occupation still. And a local farmer pulled out of his country lane drive and collided with a car and sort of, it happened like that, which was just, horrendous. And it sort of made me obviously stop and think if what I was doing was a good thing. Gumball was all about having fun and set up for creating something that I wanted everyone around the world to enjoy, not sort of shoot me down for doing it sort of thing. No. So I kind of had that backlash, of course, and had to kind of reassess everything a little bit. And I think, at that point, the rally had already grown to an extent where if that accident had happened any time from 1999 to 2005, I almost kind of would have said, well, we hadn't, put this structure in place to kind of manage what we were putting on. But from about 2005 onwards, we'd reached that level where countries and cities, and we were working with them. We had sponsorship from ministries of tourism and support from working with the police, as opposed to people thinking we're doing something lawless against the grain sort of thing. And, city centres, we were closing down and doing public events and everything. So we were kind of like, when that happened in 2007, we were actually working with authorities to make the event a public spectacle and a fun event for everyone. So, despite doing that, it's still, there's still a risk. Of course there always is. When anyone's driving anywhere from A to B, anything could happen sort of thing. And but it did make us the following years kind of implement even more sort of structures and sort of really, I think then spent the following probably even decade and even longer. I think even now we're trying to instill in the participants that, they're on a road trip adventure. It's not a race. It's not about driving fast. And I think some of those early TV shows, they show the highlights, don't they? It doesn't mean that everyone is driving crazy and fast. And it might have been a handful. It might have been camera crews just catching burnouts and stuff because it's actually something to put on camera, as opposed to kind of like, that's what everybody is doing and they're all stupid and whatever. They weren't, it was...
that was all about the cars as well. And what's coming across from you, I'm learning so much from this, which is great, is that it's so much more than the car rally.
Yeah.
I mean, even to the point where there's a whole load of philanthropy behind it. Yeah. There's the fusion of culture, traveling, experiences, and actually that is resonating massively, where you're saying it's not about just charging through who wins the Gumball. I haven't even covered that. It's not about winning a race.
It's never been about that either, but it's just, as I said, in those early years of, I guess what we did in those early 2000s, and obviously now, before going back to that, now there's a whole new challenge because we sort of cross generations of audience now. So, a lot of people that even work in my office now weren't even born in this time when we're sort of talking about, So, but that sort of, that early period, it was just a different time that we've sort of, moved on from, and just have to kind of, like I said, build the brand really.
But you've got different influences now. I mean, if you look at the kind of going back to the names you mentioned earlier, James Hunt, to then so many sort of cool things that are cool that are not cool anymore have disappeared.
Yeah.
The Gumball 3000 is still cool.
Yeah.
And I said to you, and I wasn't being deliberately complimentary, but when I met you earlier and you're cool, there's an undertow of how so much of that is your kind of soul, your input, and you're keeping that relevant and kind of, it sounds like the people in your office, the people around you, you move well with the time. So what I mean by that is it now gamers? Is it now influencers on TikTok that are becoming the people that are getting more, because you're embracing that?
It is, and we've had to embrace that, but not kind of because we sort of thought, what do we do next?
It feels organic.
It is organic, and it's actually sort of happens sort of in the sense that because we've had so many amazing names participate over the years, that the current generation of YouTubers, influencers have grown up sort of, they've had heroes. So their heroes have done Gumball, and now they want to do Gumball. So, having this year's rally, we've got a guy called I Show Speed. He's one of the biggest sort of streamers in the world. We've got Sidemen on it, Now they've all grown up having some sort of heroes of theirs to be part of Gumball, and that's why they've approached us to say, we want to do it.
Following on from that, these guys, what cars are they coming? Because rewind 15 years ago, it would have been a Lamborghini, it would have been the fastest Ferrari. Is that still what the Gumball is, or is there a moving trend to not necessarily being the fastest car, the most uncomfortable car.
No, I guess the rally entry grid, as I sort of refer to it as, is now refined, and it's been refined to 120 cars every year for the last 15 years. And 50 of those cars are from the alumni, and 50 are new, and the other 20 we sort of allocate for sponsors allocation, because a sponsor might get 1 or 2 cars as part of their deal. And I say, within that, I try and curate the most interesting group of people and cars that you could assemble together. So I'm really looking for, someone who's willing to enter it and drive a Caterham next to someone who's bringing their, F40 next to someone who's in their Lamborghini Urus, or their Rolls Royce, or sometimes we've had people do it with a chauffeur, or I don't know. And I'd say that sort of 60% of the cars are 2-seaters, and the rest sort of bigger, obviously.
But you're orchestrating that, so you're almost like, again, the conductor.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't want, because it wouldn't suit you to have 10 F40s or 10 Ferraris.
Maybe 10 F40s, I'd
that's
allow,
cool.
But
yeah, I'm with you on that. I love that. But yeah, you're actually trying to put that variety in place.
Yeah. And equally, it's kind of curated as being as international as possible. So every year we're sort of above 40 different nationalities. So people are literally sort of, wherever it's starting, they're flying or shipping their cars into that start location, and we go from there.
I love this. And I think just tapping into the title of the program, Extraordinary Life Stories, you must have so many stories. Is there one, just out of the 25 years of organising and all these experiences, is there one that just jumps to the front of your mind?
2008's rally is still one that when I look back on it, I think, how did we pull that one off? And that was one that started in San Francisco and finished in Beijing at the Olympics. And we drove, San Fran to LA, to San Diego, to Vegas. From Vegas, flew all 120 cars, 300 people. And we went to Pyongyang, North Korea, and then did a big event, concert in North Korea, and party that night, and then obviously next day back into China, and then finished in Beijing. But just taking the event to North Korea was something that everybody said you can't do, and experiences that I had going backwards and forwards there over sort of 3 or 4 years. I ended up doing karaoke with Kim Jong-il, and things that are kind of things that sound surreal even saying it now. And looking back on it, given it's quite some time ago, I'm like, how did that happen?
But you made it happen.
But that was a highlight for sure.
Yeah. And I just haven't talked about yourself at all since we got to that beginning of the Gumball sightings. But sitting here now, you clearly did a lot of modelling. There's a fitness to you. I can tell you keep yourself fit, and you run a successful business.
Yeah.
What do you do? What do you do to prioritise your fitness? What works for you?
I've got 5 kids. Which is a good starting point. So particularly my sort of 18-year-old son, I think he probably tries to keep me fit with him. He's into all sports and is very similar to me. Our foundation has a charity football team, so I play in those matches still and sort of try and keep fit for that. Although we did a match in Inter Miami about 18 months ago, and in a training session I broke a couple of ribs in about a few weeks before the match, but I still played. I was okay. So.
Good on you.
Yeah.
A lot of people will look at the Gumball, the branding, all the images, you mentioned MTV earlier, as just kind of fun and kind of almost maybe not reckless, but kind of just lots of people going out having a laugh. There's a real undertow of sophistication to it, having now been speaking to you, that even going back to that law degree that you took. So some of the things that have happened, like the accident, and dealing with lots of people that have come to have fun, but actually need managing.
Yeah.
I feel there's a lot more coming to me that you've put into the organisation of that. That's just you, though. Have you managed to build a team around you to be able to help scale this? Because it's become a behemoth, right? It's a huge brand.
Yeah. I mean, I guess, since those early noughties, kind of where we had the MTV era, we also signed some incredible deals for us at that time, where with PlayStation, a video game, first big collection of collaboration clothing with Adidas, and then, as mentioned, went on to Puma and done Nike and various others since then. We started by that mid-2000s, the company was generating significant kind of revenue that it by far eclipsed that kind of, me and a few sort of handful of employees sort of thing, and just putting on this rally into, essentially a horrible word, but it become a corporate sort of entity. And within
still cool though. Still cool.
Yeah. I mean, I don't mean corporate in an unfun way, but we'd got a structure by that point where Gumball was making films. It got a film division, an events production division, clothing, license deals, and so on. Really. So each department was growing and still is. And so I think that the rally became 1 week of the year. That takes an enormous amount of effort, but the production team managed that. And then of course there's a commercial team managing the revenue that can be generated from it. And I'd say now as a company we probably put on an average of 4 to 6 events a month all around the world that are supporting sponsorship deals, partnerships, product launches, product sales, promotions, whatever it might be. And there's a real sort of also a mix between sort of what sort of became organically happened after doing the rally for so many years. I got this sort of high net worth alumni sort of network that is now sort of close to 7,000 individuals have taken part in the rally. So that is an incredibly powerful members club that I kind of want to look after and sort of harness that. And hence that's where the foundation sort of came from as well, like using that voice and the voice of our alumni's, the celebrity of it, the wealth of it, everything really to kind of do good. But really, we're a company now that just, here's a statistic for you that is sort of shows where we've grown to as a brand outside of the rally. So we currently sell products in about 50,000 stores around the world. So that's the business. And of course, people have heard of the rally, which is great. And that maintains, as I said before, that's our advert every year. That's our kind of, if we didn't have the rally, then we'd probably have to kind of take out sort of, the traditional method of advertising, which we don't need to do. We just kind of do some kind of cool things and cool events and parties and have a presence at other things that we like. So, in the motoring world, we might be at Monterey Car Week or Goodwood or something like that, maybe hosting a party so it gives it a Gumball edge. But we're just proactive the whole year round. So the rally, like I said, is just more the sort of the backbone that our production company can handle really well.
It's really smart because at the alumni, for example, you were saying that 50% of each rally is, and you've got 7,000 people. So there's probably a huge amount of people that don't get in. I don't know how you manage that. That's another thing for you to manage.
It's one of those that, once the grid's full, it's full. So
first come, first serve?
Kind of with the alumni, and with the new people, it's more kind of curated as we said earlier, what we'd ideally like in terms of cars and
Slightly controversial question, but what would stop you letting someone come on? What due diligence do you do on someone coming on? So just basic example, someone that's just sold their business for 100 million, tick, they're going to be someone that can afford to do it, they can buy a great car. Yeah. But for whatever reason, there's research you do through people that know this person and they've got a bad reputation or they could be a disruptive influence. How do you choose people?
I think it depends what it is they've done. Obviously this is hypothetical, so I can't really.
Of course.
But I think, from my side, I'm really trying to get a room full of characters and personalities as well. So I do like having, the mix of the melting pot. I think there's some great friendships been made over the years that, I got a friend in New York that runs a very successful enough so he's got the means to do Gumball, but he runs something, Frank's Chop Shop. It's a barber shop in New York, and he's also had a presence in that New York sort of street culture, fashion sort of arty scene, and he's really close mates with one of the sheikhs that's done the rally. That's one of the ruling sheikhs in the Emirates, and I think those worlds wouldn't have collided unless it was on Gumball. And I like that, and so it's being all inclusive and sort of whilst obviously there's only a small number of places every year, and there's by far enough wealthy people in the world to do it. I think it is about sort of trying to just get a good mix. Yeah. And that week is a leveler. It doesn't matter what backgrounds people have got or how wealthy they are.
Self-polices as well, probably a little bit. And I'll tell you what, a lovely thing to be associated with. You've brought 7,000 plus people together that have all got a kind of combined memory bank of experiences and stories. Yeah. And then you're able to do so much for good and for fun with that. One common thread just through that last part of the conversation was success. By default, you're sitting here having been successful continually with the brand, the Rally Gumball 3000, and you have been around so many successful people as well. Yeah. Sitting here now, how do you define success?
I think it's evolved for me over the years, as it probably does with many people. I think, when you're young, you sort of want, by sheer need, you need to make some money. And so, of course, you don't want to make a little bit of money, you want to make a lot of money. But I think, I actually always embarked on everything that I've done, whether it was sort of aspiring to have the Formula One team or putting Gumball together and growing it, actually more because of the passion of the things that we're doing and the enjoyment of those things. Always saying to myself in the early years, especially when we weren't generating too much money, to sort of say that if we do it well, one day the money will come. And it's come, and which is great. But I think, and so what do I define sort of success as? I think for me it's really, it's far more success to me outside of the business and just family life than anything else. And I think also, as we all get older, I think, realizing that your time on this planet isn't too long. I think, what is success is sort of being able to enjoy life, I think, a little bit and enjoy family time, but just being able to be here. And if I can make an impact on the world and these generations that we share it with, sort of thing, then that's kind of a good place to be.
Great. Brilliant. I love the way you explain that. And I think just by default with the organisation of the rally itself, whether it's the 5-6 days you're away, but all the prep and all the events you do, how are you now juggling kind of family, work, and then kind of time for yourself?
Most entrepreneurs that I know, founders of businesses that are successful in terms of, become big brands and sort of, make an impact around the world. It's hard to switch off. I think people that I know, myself included, I think I would work 24 hours a day if I could. So I think I have to kind of prioritize time so that I'm making sure that I am, having family time or escapism. For me, even still watching football matches is sort of, a great escapism from everything. Watching Formula One or whatever it might be. Going to music concerts. I still, and my other sort of, I've mentioned it the whole way through sort of thing, but the art world has been sort of big impact on me because my dad's an artist and still paints every day. And I'd say that aside from the cars and the parties and the music and everything that we discussed, I've collected art now for sort of 30 years and I enjoy the art world enormously and sort of so. It's time for me, escapism for me is going to galleries and that kind of thing, and I need that to kind of have the break in.
It taps into your creativity as well. There's a creative. You're able to put
and
so
it
much
still inspires me as well.
That's the word. That's the word. Yeah, and fulfillment through sort of following your passion, but also you've been able to. I love the fact you've done that through your business. And I used that word earlier, fusion. But you brought these interests together to create something that clearly is flourishing, if you like, in a creative word. But alongside this, you mentioned like going to the gallery to relax and kind of sort of decompress. What works for you from a kind of mindset point of view? You're a successful businessman. You just mentioned we both wish there was more time in the day. Are you one of these people that's up at 4:30 in the morning and own the morning, own the day, doing a run and meditating and before 9 in the morning?
Well, I'm only up at that time in the morning right now because I've also got a 2-year-old. So
okay, right, that's I remember that.
So that's another reason to kind of
But you know what I mean. But there's this kind of default that to be successful as an entrepreneur or a CEO, you've got to get up early, you've got to kind of smash the day.
I've not really adhered to that. I think partly because certainly that first sort of, call it the 5 or 6 years prior to Gumball and the first sort of 5 or 6 years of Gumball, that sort of decade or slightly longer, I went out all the time, late. And so, I was coming in at 6 a.m. in the morning, so I couldn't be getting up at 6 a.m. And I think And that was just because I was that fashion music kind of scene that I was in. It's a late night sort of scene.
Right.
And that's really, I think I did a different podcast today where we were talking about sort of the importance and more, I was talking about networking and so on. And I think, whilst not trying to network, and I hate the word networking, I think all those years of just going out and socializing and being, it wasn't going out just for the sake of it. I think I was in part of this sort of scene where you're getting invited to interesting things and interesting people's events or musicians' parties or whatever it is, things that are really kind of appealing to go to. But all of that time, at the end of that sort of period of doing that for a while, I've got this incredible roster of friends that you could say is the network that sort of, led to what was created afterwards. So I think late nights for me has been part of actually the infrastructure of Gumball. So it's meant that I've sort of liked to start work a little bit later.
I like that because I think it's important for people to know that it's not all about one size fits all.
Yeah.
If you are in a place as you are, where you are invited to and inviting people to your own events by default.
Yeah.
If you're going to bed at 2 a.m. and getting up at 4:30, that's not healthy.
No, exactly.
So I think it's what works for you. And I think we're probably quite similar actually in my own microclimate of not enjoying and liking the word network.
Yeah.
But the power of having good people around you, whether they become friends, advisors, investors, business partners.
Yeah.
You're putting yourself out there, but you're linked with a passion and an interest. And of course, you've managed to. That's motorsport. That's traveling.
Yeah.
That's music.
Yeah.
And fashion.
I mean, that's been what's brought everyone together and made this sort of community. And I think it is the sort of when I started Gumball, I used to refer to it back then as a sort of the Gumball lifestyle that we're creating. And actually the word lifestyle was not really used for brands back then 20 years ago. Now every brand wants to be a lifestyle brand, but I feel like we kind of actually were living and breathing what we were trying to sort of, support.
But you set out to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you didn't focus on the money. And just probably my last question for you before we run out of time is if you could flip back to a young Maximilian starting out.
Yeah.
What would you do differently and what advice would you give to that young entrepreneur that was setting out with your perspective and experience now?
That's a really difficult question. I think I have probably been asked similar before, but I don't know because I think it's hard to answer with some sort of hindsight, but I think part of the success of a lot of people that are in this position where they've built something that's thrived. There's a certain drive in individuals that I don't know if it can be taught, and so I even sort of sometimes I give talks at sort of universities or something, people doing business and entrepreneurial degree or something, and it's hard to kind of teach someone to have that, and I think it's having just having your own strong vision. That's obviously something that you really do believe can become a success, and then having that sort of just that drive that no matter what gets in the way, you're going to kind of keep going, or you'll navigate through whatever's thrown at you.
Persistence. But that comes with the passion, doesn't it? Because you went about something you so believed in and enjoyed. Yeah. You're not going to lose the passion for it because you.
Asking me that question about sort of what would I have done differently. I often question whether because I was fairly good at sort of sport, if I just focused on one, could I have been that driver champion? Could I have been that footballer, whatever? But what makes me is this kind of having these interests in these different fields. So. It's difficult to sort of say what I would do differently.
Yeah, but what I quite like about that, in the nicest possible way, is we talked about pivoting earlier. It feels like you're very reactive, you're very present, you're right on it. So actually, you're making decisions in the moment as an entrepreneur that have actually, what if not every decision would have been the right one, but you move very quickly. And so actually, just watching you then for your own your reaction. Yeah, that's testament to you.
That comes with anyone that puts on live events as well. That you just learn over, nothing's going to go to plan, or, very rarely does it go to plan exactly as you wanted. And that's for multiple reasons. It might be just you're putting on a festival and it rains that weekend. You just don't know.
But what do you do? You've got to do something. You've got people coming. Yeah. Do you refund them all the tickets, or do you go, this is what I'm going to do differently? And I like that. I've got
Yeah.
one more question. What car will you be doing the Gumball in this year?
I actually don't have that confirmed yet. I'm driving with my brother-in-law. He's a YouTuber influencer in the automotive world. He's called Mr. JWW. And we've driven together on Gumball once before, and I think this year I'm sort of leaving it to him to arrange the car.
He's got a big collection of cars, though.
He's got a few nice
He's got a
cars,
few choices.
and we've got a few contacts in the motorsport, in the car world. Sorry, so people we might call up to borrow cars from car companies. So.
Yeah, which of course gives them the exposure and gets you guys to drive something pretty.
Yeah, so
awesome.
I try sometimes. I've tried to do the rally in something that no one else is in, and it's not always possible, but. No. Ideally, a prototype of some sort would be what I'd like to do. So, prototype. Yeah.
And of someone that's seen every amazing car there is, been in them, around them, and so on, what was the one car you drive home today if you could have any car?
I would drive home.
And don't think about it from a financial review. You pick the 250 GTO and then sell it and buy. What's the car that gets?
I'd actually drive home in a D-type Jaguar.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I've loved talking to you. I've learned so much more than any I could have imagined, and thank you for making time, actually.
Thank you. Cheers.